Good morning, everyone. We are learning Mishna's Bikurim, and today's learning is sponsored. Today's day of learning is sponsored by Barbara Silverman to commemorate the yahrzeit of her father, Mordechai ben Binyamin, Mark Edelman. And I'd also like to dedicate this morning's learning memory of my mother, Ms. Shlomis Rabinowitz, Shlomis Bas Rav Yaakov Eliezer. We are in the fourth Perek Daled, chapter 4 of Bikurim, Mishna Daled, Mishna 4. And we continue with the discussion about the androgynous, the androgen. And today's Mishnah is Shaveh la'anoshim Ketzad. We started off the chapter, the chapter mentions that a androgynous, an androgen, in some ways like a man, some ways like a woman, some ways like both, some ways like neither. So now we are up to Mishnah Daled that states, Shaveh la'anoshim Ketzad. In what way do we say that he is similar to both? So some of the things mentioned here are elementary, but there'll be other ones that will be a little bit more novel in the sense of something that we wouldn't necessarily automatically know. Chayav al niskar ki ish ve'isha. One is liable if anyone damages the androgynous. You're liable for the damages, physical, monetary. You damage the androgynous' property. So just as one is liable to both a man and a woman for damaging them or their property, so to the androgynous. And the androgynous himself is liable for damages that the androgynous commits, just like a man and a woman. If someone intentionally kills the androgynous, that person would be killed through capital punishment. If they do it unintentionally, then he's exiled to city of refuge. Just very shortly, if a person unintentionally kills someone else, they're obligated to basically go into a personal exile and go to a city of refuge where they will be protected from any of the relatives of the person they killed who may want to get back at him. So that's called Arei Miklat, cities of refuge, and it's an obligation to go there. So if a person were to kill a androgynous, that person would have the obligation liabilities like if they killed any man or a woman. His mother will, the literal word is will sit, but it means that the mother will sit the period of purification blood over the androgynous' birth, both like men and by women. Now it means like this. When a woman menstruates, she becomes what's called a nida. And she is forbidden to her husband. In the times of the Beis HaMikdash, she would not be able to enter the temple or to partake of any sacrifice, or she's the wife of a Kohen to eat truma. Now, a woman who gives birth is also considered like a woman who has menstruated. But there's a difference between if she gives birth to a boy and to a girl. Because what happens is like this. If she gives birth to a boy, so she is a nida, forbidden to her husband for a week. After a week, she can go to the mikveh and not be forbidden to her husband anymore. And then there is a period of time that even when she continues, let's say, to bleed, because she gave birth, that bleeding would not make her impure. This, according to biblical law, this according to Torah law, I'm getting into rabbinic law, the way the rabbis may have had to create certain stringencies because of the situation at hand, or because of the way that we actually practice things. But from a point of the letter of the law from the Torah, after she gives birth, after the first week after giving birth for a boy, there's a period of time for 33 days where even if she bleeds, she doesn't become a nida. She can't partake of sacrifices, of sacrificial meat, but she's not considered a nida to be forbidden to her husband. So there's a week time that she's a nida, forbidden to her husband, 33 days, and if she bleeds, she's not forbidden. After those 33 days, she goes back to her regular cycle, so to speak. That when she And she bleeds, she becomes a nida, and that whole process. So for a boy, she's a nida for a week, 33 days, she can bleed and still be pure. For a girl, it's 2 weeks that she's a nida, and her days of purity go for 66 days. She has a longer stretch of time. There's a longer stretch of time that she is impure, a longer stretch of time that she is pure, even though she continues to bleed. Now, I believe that the first week or first 2 weeks, she has to stop bleeding before she would be able to go to the mikvah. But if she again resumes bleeding, for the 33 for a boy, 66 for a girl, she would be pure. Now, for the androgynous, we have, of course, the issue as to whether the androgynous is a boy or a girl. So we apply the stringencies of both when it comes to their birth, which means that the amount of time after birth that she will be a nida, meaning if she were to stop before the 7 days or the 14 days, it wouldn't help. She'd still be impure. So when it comes to that period of being a nida, forbidden to her husband, we have to be stringent. The androgynous may be a girl. Therefore, it's for 2 weeks. But now for the following days where she can bleed and be pure, if we're going to be stringent, we got to treat the androgynous like a boy. It's only 33 days. After that, we'd have to, out of doubt, consider further bleeding to be the blood of nida, the blood that would make her forbidden. So when it comes to the mother giving birth to the androgynous, and the question about what is her status, for how long she'll be a nida, for how long will she be able to go through the period of bleeding that she doesn't become impure, she doesn't become a nida? Well, by the androgynous being that we have a question, is it a boy, is it a girl? We have to adopt the stringencies of both. For 2 weeks, she'll be a nida. For 33 days only, she will have what's called dam toyar, bleeding, but still remain pure, still remain permissible to her husband. Okay, next. And she inherits, or she receives the holy objects, the holy things of the borders. That's the translation. The holy things of the borders, like both men and women. Now, the holy things of the borders is what we refer to when we talk about truma, or trumas ma'aser or challah, meaning the gifts that we give to a kohen from our grain, or that the Levi gives from the tithing that he received, or the challah we separate from the dough that we give to the kohen, again, according to Torah law. These are things that can be eaten anywhere within the land of Israel. They're not only at the temple of the Beis HaMikdash, they're not only in Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. They can be all over the land of Israel. And therefore, they're called Kodshei HaGavul, the holy objects of the borders. As long as you're within the borders of the Jewish of Israel, you can eat these. They can eat these. Now, the Mishna is saying that if you want to give, you have truma, as we mentioned many times before, the produce, your new produce, you separate. The first separation truma goes to the kohen. You can go to the kohen. You can go to the kohen's wife. You can go to the kohen's daughter who's not married. There's no challah. There's dough that you separate that you give to the kohen. You can go to the kohen, to a male kohen, to a kohen's wife, to a kohen's daughter. That can go to any kohen, man or woman. Therefore, if you want to give those things to an androgynous, no problem. Whether the androgynous is a male or a female, they can receive these things. They can get these things. Okay, that's what it means. He receives, the androgynous receives the holy objects of the border, like women, men and like women. The same thing would apply that you can give him, if let's say he's a Levi. Let's say the androgynous is a Levi. You can give him Meiser, the first tithing that goes to the Levi, because that can go to both a Levi or his wife or the Levi's daughter. The Ha'imar, one who says, Hareini Nazir Shaza Ish V'Isha, Harei Nazir, one who proclaims, I accept upon myself to be a Nazir. If this person in front of me is either a man or a woman, then he will be a Nazir. Now, a Nazir is a person, is a very special kind of vow. When a person says, I am a Nazir, that means that he has now taken the Nazirite vow, which means that he may not drink wine, he may not cut his hair, he or she may not drink wine, may not cut their hair, and may not come impure from any kind of contact or being under the same roof with a dead body. This is what being a Nazir means, and it's something that you accept upon yourself. Now, because it's a vow, you can make conditions on this vow. You can say, I become a Nazir if, the example of the Mishnah is the person says, I accept upon myself a vow. If this, let's make it simple, right? Let's say there's somebody, there's a person in front of you. You don't know if it's a man or a woman. And you say, I accept upon myself to be a Nazir if the person in front of me is a man. Okay. And it comes out that it's a woman. The condition for accepting being a Nazir was if it's a man. It's not a man, so he's not a Nazir. Now, in the case of our Mishnah, the person standing in front of him is an androgynous. And the person making the vow says, I accept upon myself to be a Nazir if this person is a man or a woman. Either one. Okay. Maybe you don't even know he's an androgynous. But at the end of the day, if this is what he says, I accept upon myself to be a Nazir. If the person in front of me is a man or a woman, makes no difference, either one, well, the androgynous is either one of them. He's either a man or a woman. And therefore, he gets included in the vow of this person because this person's vow was if it's a man or a woman, and he's one of the two. And therefore, the vow of Nazirus that this person made is going to take effect because the condition of his vow was if this person is a man or a woman, and that's what androgynous is, either a man or a woman. Okay, so we are now continuing the laws of Rechilas, Klal Test Chapter 9 of the Chavetz Chaim, and the scenario that the Chavetz Chaim has been dealing with in the past couple of paragraphs is where that there is the question of a match being made between a young man and a young woman, and some very important information for any one of those sides that can make a big difference if this match will actually be made, and all the discussions that are involved in what you're allowed to reveal, what you're not. But the Chavetz Chaim is now going to start Sif Tes, paragraph 9, in the following way. Now, let's say, until now, there have been discussions about making the match. Now, what if the match was already made? I mean, you didn't know anything beforehand. You found out that a match was actually finalized between the two sides. And now you realize that things aren't so good. And you recognize, as we said before, again, you have to make sure that all the conditions are fulfilled. But you recognize that this that the young woman's side are planning on tricking the young man, whether regarding the dowry or regarding support. And this was the case we spoke about before, where you somehow you have to figure this out. You have to be sure about this. But basically, that you are sure that things are not going to that the man who promised the young woman's father who promised dowry and a certain amount of dowry, that he's not going to keep it. He's not going to keep it. He told you he's not going to keep it. He's not going to keep it. But the thing is that at this point of time, the shidduch, the match was made. Now, the match was made isn't just like. And again, in this scenario, it's not just like, they drink l'chaim and said Mazel Tov. That's what's commonly done nowadays. But what used to be done was that, again, it was because there was a lot of things involved. We're talking about, there were financial obligations involved. We're not talking about the ksuba now. We're not talking about the ksuba now. We're talking about other things that were outside of what a ksuba guarantees a woman. There were more things. Here it was not a question of guaranteeing the woman. Here it's a question of guaranteeing the young man. And these were real financial obligations. When a shidduch was made, they drew up a document. They drew up a official document, or again, according to religious law, official document. There were kinyanim made. Kinyanim means there were acquisitions made. If I want to sell you something, so you make an acquisition to acquire it. When I'm going to become obligated to you, there is we also go through the act of acquisition, to strengthen and to make concrete the obligation. But these are talking about real obligations. It's not just promises. We're talking about real obligations that aren't met. Actually, you can go to a Beis Din rabbinical court to force the other side to do it. I don't know about good for family, for family tranquility. But at the end of the day, this is what it is. It's a real financial obligation, which can go in both directions. And it's also a real obligation to go through with the marriage. It's not just a one-way deal. One person has an obligation to give money and the other person just, waits there like a creditor. No, they have their obligations. Their obligations to get married, and then after they get married, to support, and whatever conditions that the girl side made with the young man. These are all included in the match and in the obligations of the match. So we're talking about here a full-fledged transaction, and therefore it becomes much harder now to go ahead and to reveal, let's say, to the young man that the other side is tricking him, because the question now really is, how does he proceed after this? And how does he proceed according to Jewish law, according to halacha, once the obligations have been made? Okay, so let's read now. Totally bazat. It's contingent on this. If you go now to the young man and you tell him your future father-in-law has no intentions of paying this up, he has no intentions whatsoever, and again, it's not going to happen. It's kind of hard to figure that out, but the way I understood from the way the Chavetz Chaim was right, from the words of the Chavetz Chaim that we had yesterday, it doesn't seem to be that easy to figure out. But assuming that you do know it, you know it for sure. You know it for sure. So now you're going to go over to the young man and tell him this. Now, is the young man allowed to believe you about what you're saying with his future father-in-law? He's not allowed to believe it. I mean, it's just you telling him. There's no witnesses to the fact. There's only one person. So it's not like he can accept it as the absolute truth. And therefore, there's only so much he can do in order to deal with this, just based on what you're saying. So therefore, he said, Chacham says like this: if, let's say, you surmise that when you tell the young man about what you are very certain about, that he's going to now keep it in mind to protect himself. Which means he'll try to find a way that the future father-in-law can't trick him. Or that the chassan, if he's going to act, he will only do it according to what Jewish law allows him to do through a rabbinical court. But that may be, I'm not sure. But, that if he's going to do anything, he will not act on his own. He will, again, either try to find some kind of, advice on how to deal with what's going on here, how to deal with it to be able to get what he deserves, or whatever he's going to do, he'll only do it through rabbinical court. He would only do it through rabbinical court. He'll only do it in the right way. With the legalistly, then you can reveal to him what you know. But again, all the conditions that we mentioned before have to be fulfilled. You have to be, again, clear. You have to be sure about what you're telling him. You cannot exaggerate it, overstate it more than it is. And your intention has to be not to get back at anyone, but to help the person who may get hurt. And you also have to know that the chassan isn't tricking him in any way. Okay? How do you know that? I guess, as long as you can assume that the chassan is an upright person and you have there's nothing that you see that he's tricking him from his part. Okay? So then if those conditions are all met, then you can reveal it to the young man. If, let's say, he sees or considers as a possibility that what he tells the young man he will take as absolute truth, and he's just going to go in and break up, and he's going to break off the engagement without any kind of claim, without any explanation, just going to break it off. It's forbidden to let him know that. It's forbidden to reveal to him. For all the conditions to be made just based on what you're saying, or even when two witnesses are telling him this, to be able to act on his own without going through a rabbinical court, that's very, very rare. And therefore, at the end of the day, and here you're only one witness, you're only one person. So if you're only one person, and he's not even really allowed to believe what you're saying, if you know he's going to believe it and just break off the match, which again, even with all the obligations, if you break it, you break it. The problem is you're breaking a very strong commitment, which is a very serious thing to do. But at the end of the day, you break it, you break it. No one can force you to marry the person. But if this is going to happen based on just what you told him, you know how to tell him. So therefore, it gets, the whole thing is very tricky to be able to do this. And if there's any situation a person finds themselves in like this or similar to this, they have to really think through things and get some counsel, get some advice how to deal with it. But it's very clear from, as we've been going through this, that once the shidduch is made, again, if the shidduch hasn't been made, the person doesn't want to get involved because of this possibility, he has a right to do that. Wants to protect himself, he can do that. But not to break an obligation, to renege on a full obligation, that's not so simple just to be able to do that based on what one person tells you. And therefore, when you, the person telling him, knows he will act accordingly or properly with this information, then you can tell him. If he's not, then you may not. Have a wonderful day.